Hello everyone. Okay, so welcome to this class on macroeconomics. So my name is Tolu and this will be a class on the introduction to macroeconomics. So here we go. So we're going to start from the concept of the invisible hand. All right. So what is the invisible hand? What are we talking about? You hear this banded a lot by economists. They always talk about the invisible hand. It's sort of different from the invisible hand in biology. Okay, so if you remember biology, survival of the fittest, we're talking about sort of the winning struggle, right? Where the best comes out, right, in the jungle. So say you have all these species trying to evolve, and the best form of the species is what will continue and what will survive. Now, this is sort of similar in economics. So we have this concept where competition between firms is portrayed as the winning struggle. Stronger firms will survive and prosper, and weaker ones will die out. Okay, so this is sort of what we call creative destruction by this man Joseph Schumpeter. Okay, so Schumpeter says, okay, what's going to happen is as innovation comes, right, the best products will stay in the market and the weaker products will fail. Sort of like the iPhone. Okay, so the iPhone will survive. It has survived for now, and weaker versions of whoever is making other phones will not do as well. Okay, Milton Friedman as well is another prominent economist who advocates this principle. All right, so what do economists mean when they talk about the invisible hand? What they just mean is that left to itself, natural selection should work fast to eliminate the weakest institutions in the market, and these institutions should typically be gobbled up by the successful. So weaker firms will not survive. And of course, the same happens in the job market. Okay, so people might not really agree with this, and we're trying to maybe move away from this. It might be sort of bitter, but we're saying is that there's going to be some times where there's going to be unemployment, there's going to be friction, some people won't have jobs. The good ones, the good workers will have jobs. The less skilled ones will sort of have to leave the labor market as well. Same with institutions. Okay, so the best firms will remain, weaker ones will leave. All right, but why is this contentious? Because you have this great economist as well, a British economist by the name of John Maynard Keynes. And what he's saying is that there is nothing so disastrous as rational investment policy in an irrational world. So what's he saying? There is nothing so disastrous as a rational investment policy in an irrational world. What he's saying is that there's some things that happen quite by chance. Okay, some things are irrational, you can't explain everything. So this idea that the best will survive is not always rational in economics, and we will see why in a minute. So to give you some more background, we need to talk about very prominent economists, people like Adam Smith. Okay, in any economist textbook you pick up, they always talk about Adam Smith. He had this very famous book called The Wealth of Nations. And what's he saying? He's saying that as individuals pursue their own interests, they end up serving the interests of the society by and large. So what's he saying by this? He's saying, okay, say I'm thirsty, right? I need to pursue my own interest. I need to get a glass of water. What I will do is I'll probably go and buy one, right? Now, because I've bought that glass of water, that cup of water, what I've done is I've created employment because we needed someone to go get that water, to purify, to put it in a bottle, and to serve it up. So look at all the investment has happened because I was thirsty, right? Obviously, I will have to have my own economic function where I get the money from it. to pursue my interest. So what am I doing? By pursuing my own interest, I'm serving the interest of society by and large. So interest of society for like employment, for instance, income generation, infrastructural development, just because I want to supply my own interests. Okay, so what he's saying, Smith says, an individual only intends his own gain, and he is in this, as in many other cases, led by an invisible hand. So this concept of the invisible hand again, to promote an end which was no part of his intention. So I didn't mean to create employment, I didn't mean to create innovation, but I've done so by wanting to call my mom. Okay, so because I need to call my friends, call my spouse, call my family, I need to have a phone. Because of that interest, scientists, innovators will come up with a phone, and look at what I've done. I've created employment, created all this infrastructure, just because I was trying to fulfill my own gain. Of course, this is also supported by David Ricardo, another prominent figure of classical economics. And what he's saying is he comes under this school of political economy. So he's talking about comparative advantage. Okay, so he says trade is related to comparative costs, which enable a more efficient allocation of resources. As a result, economies are made which bring about a given income while at the same time increasing the possible output from such given resources. So what does he mean by this? He's saying we have some resources. What we're going to do, we're going to compare our comparative costs for allocating those resources, look at the most efficient way we can allocate those resources and pursue those activities. So what he's saying is, once again, it's a soft invisible hand, right? So this happens unconsciously. We're saying we have this, we want to get to that. All right, we compare our possible routes to do it, our possible outcomes, and then we choose the best. Okay, so this is another way the invisible hand works. Now, for a long time, people, follow that principle of the invisible hand. So economists, for instance, didn't want the government to get involved in any form of decision making concerning the economy, because they thought, listen, if the government intervenes, they destroy this concept of the invisible hand. So they sort of nudge people, or they nudge the economy into things that might not be optimal, or into production, or into schemes, into pathways that might not be good for the economy. All right, now this was the norm for a very long time, until this brilliant economist came on the scene. His name is John Maynard Keynes, and he rejected this classical notion of the invisible hand, or this laissez-faire economy. So just leaving things to run on their own, because the invisible hand would, allocate resources. People would do what was best for the economy automatically, okay? So, things would just happen. The good would survive, good firms would survive, and the bad ones would die out, and things like that. All right, now he said there are two main reasons, okay? Two crucial reasons why this equilibrium could persist. So two reasons why we would not have this optimal allocation due to the invisible hand, or this laissez-faire theory. The first one is rigidities in the labor market. So what does he mean by this? He says, listen, imagine for instance that laborers were stuck in, say, the unfavorable labor position. Say, for instance, if I could do better as a rap star, or pop star, or as a basketball player, or if I'm producing the iPhone 5, but I could produce the iPhone 7 better, right? But it's hard for me to change jobs. Okay, so it's hard for labor to move from unproductive resources, or suboptimal allocation of labor, to what will be optimal, right? Because I have things to do. I have to pay the bills. I have kids. I have a family. Okay, I have things to do. So there's friction in the labor market. So instead of moving naturally on to this invisible hand place, I might be stuck. So this is one reason why the invisible hand might not be the optimal way to look at things. It might not be good to just leave things to this laissez-faire, to the invisible hand to take care of. Maybe we might have to get involved. Another one is maybe due to inefficiencies or deficiency of demand. So say it'll be good for me as an individual to demand for more hours in the gym, or maybe to demand for cleaner environment, maybe fuel efficient cars, right? But I can't afford it. What am I going to do? I'm going to be stuck in this place that is inefficient, right? That isn't working. You know, maybe my life will be shorter. I would have less enjoyment, right? Because I cannot afford what is better. Okay, so what John Maynard Keynes is saying, once again, there's a deficiency of demand. We know what's good, but there isn't enough to pay for it, or there isn't enough to demand for it. So for these two reasons, okay, this invisible hand concept might not work. So we need to get involved. The government has to get involved. The government has to get involved in the labor market. The government has to get involved in the demand market. All right. So Keynes advocated the best way to pull an economy out of a recession is for the government to borrow money and increase demand by infusing the economy with capital to spend. So this happened during the Great Depression of the 1930s. So he's saying, listen, people don't have money to spend. Are we just going to wait for this invisible hand to just make things right, and then they'll be able to pay for food, for clothes, for education, for health for their families? Okay, we can't do that, right? The government needs to borrow some money, infuse this into the economy so that the economy goes well. Okay, now this is in sharp contrast to this laissez-faire economy, this invisible hand things that that believes the government should not intervene. So as a result of this, in 1936, Keynesian economics transformed the macroeconomics with views that a depressed economy is the result of inadequate spending. So Keynes argues that the government intervention can help a depressed economy through monetary policy and fiscal policy. Sounds about familiar, right? You might have heard of this before. Monetary policy and fiscal policy. All right. So this is what he's saying. He's saying, listen, because of inadequate spending, inadequate demand, rigidities in the labor market, we can't go to where we should and then earn more money, and we can't produce what we should produce. We're stuck in dead-end jobs. We can't afford what is good for us. We have to get involved as a government. So the crux of it is this, according to Keynes, or Keynes, how you want to pronounce it, okay? Managing the economy is a government responsibility. So this right here is the crux of it. So we can't just leave things to the invisible hand. We can't leave things to laissez-faire. Managing the economy is a government responsibility. So let's look at some arguments for and against the invisible hand. Does the invisible hand exist? Of course it does. So the invisible hand certainly does exist. And there are endless examples to illustrate this. All right, let's look around the world, in the UK, in the US, any capitalist economy. We'll look at Japan, Germany, any economy that's capitalist, around Africa, Australia, South America, you name it, Asia. Okay, there are people who advocate that the government should not get involved in the economy. Okay, so certain things are best left to innovation and the free market and enterprise. Okay, for instance, if we left the mobile phone company to for the government to regulate, we probably wouldn't have had as much innovation as we do. Okay, so there are anti-regulation bodies and lobbies, and we know that this exists. But we know that free markets are prone to predictable market failures. Look at the stock market, for instance. It goes up, it comes down. Look at your typical business circle, all right? You have a boom, then you have a recession, then a depression, then you have growth again, okay? So, there are ups and downs, right? Just because the invisible hand exists doesn't mean that free markets will always deliver optimal results. Okay, there are ups and downs, it's variation. All right, let's look at an example. A great example of this is anti-pollution regulation. So think about it. Look at the air and water, right? So the air and water is owned by every one of us on the planet, right? Now, before anti-pollution laws existed, this water and this air, served as a convenient dump for people, all right, and the pollution for companies at no extra cost. And this led to more pollution than was optimal, and this hurt everyone. All right, so think about it. If I was a factory and my waste product was uranium or plutonium or some other radioactive substance that hurts people, right? I could just go dump it somewhere, and it will affect the air, affect water, people downstream. There are lots of examples about this. You can read up, about when Japan was industrializing. All right, so what would happen is companies would literally just pollute, okay, and this led to more pollution that was unoptimal. Okay, so if we had just left the free market, the invisible hand, to run things, this would have been really bad. We could talk about the tragedy of the commons as well. This is a very good example too. So what does the tragedy of the commons mean? What we're saying is, say we're all shepherds, okay, and we own sheep, and we had this place where all our cattle used to go to graze, and then nobody took care of it. We would just take our sheep or our cattle, our goats, whatever, our cows, and they would just go graze there. Now after a while, if we don't regulate the grassland, after a while we're just going to find out that we've grazed the land to death. Okay, so we might want a system of maybe rotation, maybe fertilization, to make sure that we have a place for our cattle to graze. Okay, especially if resources are finite. All right, so if your question is, does the invisible hand exist, and does it produce better results than the command economy, the answer is yes. So the invisible hand, of course, is better than a command economy where the government regulates everything. Okay, like we said, it was better for innovation to give us the phones, to give us fashion, to give us all kinds of food and all that. It's yes. The invisible hand is better than a command economy, without a doubt. You can look at what's happened to free economies compared to all the command economies in the world. Okay, the difference is clear. It's very glaring. But does the invisible hand always produce optimal results? Now this is the area of contention. Does the invisible hand produce optimal results? According to Schumpeter and his creative destruction idea, he might say yes. Keynes would definitely say no, okay, due to the reasons we've discussed. Now you are going to have to make up your mind. All right, now that we've done that, we can go straight into our main topic, this introduction of macroeconomics. All right, so we know economics is divided into two parts. It's microeconomics, which we've done before, which you've heard about, you can read about it, and then macroeconomics. Okay, so micro, like we've discussed before, micro is the study of choices that individuals and businesses make. All right, so if you haven't looked at my videos on micro, you should go back and look at them, or pick up any textbook. So we're talking micro, right? Small, micro, okay, small, minute. Study of choices that individuals and businesses make, and the way those choices interact in markets, and the influence of governments. So an example of microeconomic question is, why are people buying more ebooks and fewer hard copy books? So people, right? Individuals. Macroeconomics, on the other hand, is the study of the performance of the national and global economy. So we're talking the whole economy, like the UK economy, the US economy, okay? The economy of South Africa, the economy of Nigeria, the economy of China, Japan, okay, Australia, whatever, okay? National, the world economy, right? And what you find is now we even have some companies who are bigger, who have bigger budgets than some countries. Okay, the incomes from some companies, some massive companies, is bigger than the budget for some countries. Okay, when we're talking macro, we're talking about the entire economy. An example of a macroeconomic question is, why is the unemployment rate in the United Kingdom so high? Okay, we could Look at this further. Look at some microeconomic questions versus some macroeconomic questions. I have some examples here. An example of a microeconomic question, for instance, could be, should I go to a business school or take a job right now? So that affects you. A macroeconomic version of this question will be, how many people are employed in the economy as a whole this year? So the whole economy, okay? A microeconomic question could be, what determines the salary offered to Henry Shaw, okay, who's been employed by HSBC. He has an MBA. What determines his salary? A macroeconomic version of this could be, what determines the overall salary levels paid to workers in a given year, okay, to all the workers, right? Microeconomic questions could also be, what government policies should be adopted to make it easier for low-income students to attend college. A macroeconomic version of it could be, what government policy should be adopted to promote employment and growth in the economy as a whole, instead of just, a subsection of low-income workers. A microeconomic question could be, what determines whether Citibank opens a new office in Shanghai? Sorry, trying to pronounce it properly. Macroeconomic question could be, what determines the overall trade in goods, services, and financial assets between the UK and the rest of the world, okay? Or say between the UK and China as a whole. So just to summarize, macroeconomic analysis focuses on the whole economy rather than just one market within it. Macroeconomic policies would influence work, incomes, and life of almost all organizations and citizens in the country. So that's what Keynes was talking about. So, if we're talking about helping the whole economy, okay, so government isn't just laying back and leaving things to the invisible hand. We're going to influence what happens in the economy in terms of all the organizations and all the citizens there. Your typical economic objectives pursued by macroeconomic policies include stable prices, economic growth, a favorable balance of payments, and having low unemployment rates. So in summary, we've had an introduction to macroeconomics. And what we've said is macroeconomics is concerned with questions about policy. What should or what could the government do to better macroeconomic performance? The policy focus was strongly shaped by history, like we've talked about. So in particular by the Great Depression of the 1930s. So before the 1930s, people believed in this laissez-faire economy, this idea that the invisible hand would fix things in the economy. So before the 1930s, people believed in the invisible hand and laissez-faire, but since then we have had this macroeconomics as a form of science, as a form of social science. Okay, so before the Great Depression, economists, even Keynes himself, tended to regard the economy as self-regulating and believed that problems such as unemployment will be corrected through the effect of the invisible hand, and the government attempts to improve the economy's performance would be ineffective at best and would probably make it worse. So what's your class activity for the week? Your class activity is this, okay? You have 3 questions. Why do you think there's so many contrasting views and theories in economics? Okay, so we've talked about laissez-faire, invisible hand, and Keynes' sort of solution for the government to be more proactive. Why do you think there's so many contrasting views and theories in economics? The second question is it possible to practice all the economic theories? Okay, so second class activity, is it possible to practice all the economic theories? And the third one and final one, how do we decide what is best for the economy? These are your class activities for the week. Finally, it might be beneficial to point out that classical macroeconomics has its flaws, so we can't just sort of leave it all up to classical macroeconomics. For instance, if you're looking at classical economics, classical macroeconomics to be particular, Adam Smith writes that it is not from the benevolence of the butcher, the brewer, or the baker that we expect our dinner, but from their regard to their own interests. So the butcher is not giving you meat because he likes you. The brewer is not giving you wine because he or she likes you. The baker is not baking cakes and bread because they like you, but they're trying to, reach their own self-interest. They need to make some money. They need to survive too. Okay, so classical macroeconomics says, this selfish interest will lead to greater economic prosperity. We'll have the survival of the fittest firms will survive and all that. And the most competent workers will be employed. But recently, we're having this sort of hybrid of welfare capitalism where, okay, maybe we should have unemployment benefits for those who don't get jobs. Maybe we can bail out certain firms in certain instances, all right? But if we look at certain systems around the world, for instance, this Ubuntu system, for instance, Ubuntu doesn't just consider one person in isolation. So the philosophy is a person is a person through other persons, right? So I am because we are. So I am because we all are. I'm a doctor because we all, you all are here. You're my patients. I am this member of the society because, we are all a society together. Okay, so you have key features of humaneness, okay, gentleness, hospitality, empathy, deep kindness, friendliness, generosity, vulnerability, toughness, in terms of, being able to stand when things get rough, compassion, right? So, instead of just survival of the fittest, looking out for myself, I look out for the whole community, all right? There's this practice in Ubuntu that I find really interesting. If someone does something bad or something wrong, they just take the person to the center of the village or, the square, and all the people gather around the person and they just tell them what they keep telling the person what he or she has done in the past that is good, so, as opposed to just punishing the person, there's space for punishment, but, we're saying, okay, maybe we need to show some compassion. Okay, this person has obviously done things that are bad, that is bad now, but he or she has done things that are good in the past. Okay, so there are other economic systems that you might want to consider, and you might want to read up on this. There are very good authors out there who have very interesting ways to solve world problems. All right, and finally, time and chance happens to everyone, okay? So, for instance, nobody decides when to be born, where to be born. You didn't decide to be born in this generation. Your parents didn't decide to be born in the previous generation. You didn't decide what family you were going to be born in, for instance, what part of the world you were going to be born in. So, so macroeconomics cannot solve these kind of problems, okay? We can only solve the kind of problems that happen now in the economy, now that we're in here. How do we maximize human welfare, human utility, human satisfaction, okay? Help the human experience. So that's it for today. Don't forget your class activity. Do them, and I will see you later. Have a good day, and bye for now.